Okay, so today we're going to be comparing and contrasting solving equations versus solving inequalities. So at the top of this page, we have a Venn diagram to kind of help us visualize how are solving equations and inequalities alike and how are they different. So first, I want you to just pause the video and kind of think about some of these things on your own. So think about how you solve, think about how many answers you get, think about graphing, think about what the goal of solving is, and then when you're all out of options, go ahead and push play again so that you can see what I came up with. So when you're solving one-step inequalities, one thing that they have that is the same is that you're always trying to get the variable by itself. So need variable by itself. Okay, so need variable by itself. Okay, another way that they are alike is that you always do the opposite operation. So you solve using opposite operation. Okay, one way that equations and inequalities are different is when you get an answer to an equation, you get typically one solution. So now there is an exception because sometimes you can get an answer of no solution and sometimes you can get an answer of all real numbers. Okay, so typically though when we think of equations we think of having one solution. Now when you have inequalities you have a limit to what your solution can be. So sometimes you'll have x is greater than 2, so then any number that is bigger than 2 will work. Sometimes you have x is less than -1, so any number that is less than -1 will work. So there's kind of like limitations and intervals when you have a solution to inequality. So solutions have limits. Okay? Also with inequalities, you're going to graph your inequality and you'll always have a line showing possible solutions. Now when you graph, and we don't typically graph our equation solutions, but if you were to graph some of your x equals 5, you would have a dot at 5. Okay, so there wouldn't be a line extending on forever, it would be a point on the graph. Okay, so that's kind of how solving equations and inequalities are alike and how they are different. So then down there it says solve one-step addition and subtraction inequalities just like one-step equations. The goal is to get the variable by itself. The procedure is opposite operation. And then your solution will have many possible answers. Okay, so then what I want you to do is I want you to go through and finish the bottom of this page, graph it, and solve it, and then you can check your answers once you're done. Okay, hopefully you did pause the video, but here are going to be your solutions to the ones that you just solved. So if you did something wrong, go ahead and evaluate it and fix it so that you do have the correct answer. Okay, and then on the back side, we're going to talk about some graphing. Oops, that's not what you wanted. On the back side, you're still going to practice some graphing. One thing I want you guys to be aware of is that I always like my variable to come first. So you'll see in the first one, you have b is greater than -1. My variable came first because it's on the left side of the inequality. Therefore, it's easier for me to interpret it. So if b is greater than -1, it's anything that is bigger than -1. Now you look on the second one, and you have 0 is less than z. Okay, to me that's a little more confusing to interpret, so I'm going to rewrite that inequality so that my variable comes first. So I would rewrite it as z, and then you'll see here that the alligator is eating z, so when I rewrite my inequality, the alligator still has to eat z in order to not change the meaning. Therefore, z is greater than 0. Okay, so for me, this one's easier to interpret because now I read it as z is greater than 0, so z can be anything bigger than 0. So your next task is to go ahead and graph all of these inequalities and rewrite them so that your variable becomes first.